The Chicago Bulls are all set to take on the Memphis Grizzlies in their final preseason game, and it sounds like the Bulls are finally getting some positive injury news. What's up, guys? I'm Ross. This is our Tourist Fan Club, and yes, you should be subscribed. If you're new here, make sure to hit the like button, and if you haven't heard, only $4.99 a month gets you access to the exclusive content of the Super Fan Club, all kinds of really cool perks, plus you could be the Super Fan of the Day, and shout out to them. So, Bulls Grizzlies Friday night. Don't know when you're listening or watching this, but tonight potentially, or tomorrow night, or it was in the past and you're just watching old videos because you really enjoy my content, which shout out to you because that's spectacular. Patrick Williams, guys, I alluded to it in my tease. Patrick Williams and Tony Bradley both got positive injury update news today. They are both probable for the final preseason game against the Grizzlies. Patrick Williams has been practicing doing 5-on-5s. He hasn't been restricted at all from what I understand. Tony Bradley today, as I record this on Thursday, was able to be a full participant in practice, and now he is considered probable for the game. Huge injury news for the Bulls. I mean, that affects our starting lineup. That affects our bench. We're not talking about guys who are fighting for the roster here. We are talking about two heavy contributors on this team that we are going to be seeing for the first time, most likely, against the Grizzlies. And we can preview the Grizzlies a little bit here too. It sounds like Dillon Brooks and our old friend Chris Dunn, who is on the Grizzlies now, which I totally forgot. Those guys are both out. Chris Dunn had a dental procedure. I don't know. Is he good? Like, mouth okay? I guess you got to communicate and stuff, but you don't really need your mouth to play basketball necessarily. So I hope he's doing good, because dental procedure is not one I've seen often on the injury report. Dillon Brooks, we know he's still recovering from that hand fracture. It sounds like Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane and Steven Adams and Ja Morant should be a go. Those guys rested against the Pacers in the Grizzlies' last game. So I'm thinking they should probably play in the final preseason game. And as far as, resting starters and stuff like that, it sounds like they rested their starters for a couple games in the preseason. So I would think the Grizzlies should be almost close to full go for their final preseason game to get themselves ready for the regular season. So not totally sure what the status is of their starters as a whole, but we should expect to at least see some of them in the game, for a certain portion of it. I don't know how long they'd play. I'm not a Memphis Grizzlies expert, obviously, but it sounds like from what I've been reading, we'll be able to see those young stars over there from the Grizzlies, just maybe not as many minutes as the Bulls starters have been playing, because now you're throwing Patrick Williams into the mix. And you want to get Patrick Williams time playing with this new starting five in a full game setting. So I think we're going to see heavy minutes again for the Bulls starters. We've seen it through each game so far. I would think that it's not going to stop now. Tony Bradley, same kind of deal. We want to see how he fits in, on the bench unit with guys like Alex Caruso. And now, we're looking at Javonte Green, who was playing really well in the Bulls starting five, coming back to the bench unit. Okay, so how are we going to restructure the bench unit to accommodate him? Is he going back to the guard spot? Are we going to keep him at the 4? These are going to be some interesting things to watch during the game to see what Billy Donovan does in terms of experimenting to work Tony Bradley and Patrick Williams back into the swing of things. It's kind of unfortunate that we only get one game to do that. It would have been nice to have a couple games to kind of tinker with lineups and rotations, as Billy Donovan has been doing already, but with Patrick Williams and Tony Bradley as a part of that. So that's the big news going into this game. It's not a whole lot to talk about, thankfully, because there are some other teams in the NBA right now that do have a lot to talk about, and it's usually not good. If you're going into your final preseason game and you are in the media spotlight, probably not for a positive reason, just off the top of my head. So Bulls, all fronts are quiet. We like that. There have been numerous things coming out, power rankings, prediction models from 538 that say the Bulls will be bad. John Hollinger is still crapping on the team. There's all kinds of stuff floating around on there. Don't worry about it, guys. Honestly, we're getting here to the beginning of the season where predictions are going to start coming out in the next few days for, finals, for season awards, all that kind of stuff. Myself included. Next week, you guys will see a podcast from me breaking down what I expect to see this season. Awards, predictions, all that kind of stuff. We'll get to that. But when you see people that are going out of their way, maybe to take the Bulls down a notch, like a John Hollinger, or like a 538 that just kind of felt like it's their Raptor model. It's so arbitrary and I don't understand it. So I don't know, guys. Don't put too much stock in it. Don't let it keep you up at night. Really, in the grand scheme of things, not that big of a deal. The other stuff floating out there right now, the Bulls did sign Bryce Alford. Brought in Bryce Alford, who is another dude who kind of has a flamethrower. Former UCLA, played with Zach LaVine. So they go back. I think he might have even played with Lonzo too. So yeah, it looks like he played with Lonzo. So Bryce Alford is a guy who has connections on the team. He was a Bruin, played with a couple of our stars. I don't foresee him being a part of the team or even getting a two-way contract. I would imagine that two-way contract would probably go to our guy Matt Thomas. Now, it is interesting, and we'll get into this probably in the season preview podcast, maybe not so much in this game preview podcast, talking a little bit about that final roster spot for the Bulls, which I don't think is locked down quite yet. We all kind of assumed Stanley Johnson would fill that role after the Bulls signed him, but I really haven't seen a whole lot from Stanley Johnson in the preseason to say he is for sure getting that 15th roster spot. I think you look at Matt Thomas and you consider the fact that Kobe White, latest on his injury is we're still a month away from contact, even potentially, 3 to 4 weeks from contact. So Kobe White, not going to be back as soon as we were maybe, kind of hoping. On the idealistic end of things or the optimistic end of things, we were hoping maybe it would be early November, sounding more like late November at this point at the earliest. So when you look at a guy like Matt Thomas, who has some of these similar skill sets as Kobe White, the ability to shoot it from anywhere on the court, and some dribbling, ball handling skills. That's an important piece to have. And if you're signing him to the two-way contract, you have that certain window of time where he can be with the team. Now, you don't necessarily know how long that's going to be. And then same thing on the flip side, if you were to give Matt Thomas that 15th roster spot and then Kobe White comes back from his injury, do you keep both of them? Do you waive Matt Thomas? What do you end up doing there? So a couple options there with that 15th roster spot, or, you give Matt Thomas the two-way and you go and look at free agency. There are still some players out there that I see getting talked about on a pretty regular basis that aren't picked up right now, that don't even have training camp deals. So maybe we'll see what the Bulls end up doing. They might wait to see what players get cut by other teams before they make that decision. Every team is kind of doing that. And I'm sure NFL fans are very familiar with like cut week, when players are getting cut and, picked up by other teams and people are switching and moving around. Happens a lot more in the NFL because there's just so many more players, rosters are so much larger. But in the NBA, it's the same thing. I mean, it's still going to happen. There's going to be players that get waived or cut, that other teams are going to want to waive or cut someone on their roster to pick up, to replace. So there's going to be a lot of moving, a lot of musical chairs, so to speak. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. Once again, it's a 15th roster spot. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but it is something to watch. Cause like I said, I don't feel like Stanley Johnson has really, blown anyone away and solidified himself as a part of this roster yet necessarily. And, roster spots come at a premium. There's only 15 of them, and the Bulls are going to want to make the most out of the 15 guys that they roll with this season. And so going into this game against the Grizzlies, I do expect the starters to play a lot of minutes. But once again, in the second half, when, the Grizzlies probably sitting their starters, Bulls might have a chance to sit their starters and still have Patrick Williams out there, still have maybe Tony Bradley out there when you don't have Zach LaVine out there necessarily, just to get them conditioned and in game shape, not even for a chemistry thing. But aside from those two guys, aside from Patrick Williams and Tony Bradley, you're going to look at the second half of this game and you're going to look at guys once again like Matt Thomas, Stanley Johnson, even Derek Jones Jr. to a certain extent, who haven't really cracked into, the rotation yet. They're a part of it because it's preseason, of course. But when it comes to regular season minutes, like Trey Brown Jr. is ahead of Derrick Jones Jr. from what I can see. And Kobe White eventually would be ahead of Matt Thomas. And, same thing with Alize Johnson appears to be in front of Stanley Johnson, firmly in front of Stanley Johnson. Javonte Green seems to be in front of all these guys. So, yes, in some respects, I think the roster has kind of been solidified, but the rotations haven't necessarily. And I think that'll be another thing to watch in the second half of this game to see which guys, this is it. Like, they really need to show out and prove themselves if they want to, for one, even make the roster. Now, I think you look at a guy like Alize Johnson. He's made the roster. He's not going anywhere. But Stanley Johnson, Matt Thomas, we don't know yet. So those are positions for those guys to go out there and really show off what they've got and try to prove to the Bulls, to keep them around. Maybe Bryce Alford gets some minutes. I don't know. Guys like Ayo Dosunmu, he's not going to see many regular season minutes, but obviously he's not going anywhere. So I don't think he necessarily has a lot to prove. I'm excited to see him play more. Alize Johnson, same kind of thing. I feel like he's Javonte Green. I feel like they've established themselves as firmly a part of this rotation. So I don't think that they have much cause for concern. Who else, man? I mean, Derrick Jones Jr., I think he needs to have a good game. I'd really like to see some more from him. Trey Brown Jr., like I said, I think is in front of Derrick Jones Jr. in the rotation right now. But I want to see a little more from Trey Brown Jr. too. A guy who I'm very high on and I think is going to have a big season. Want to see him start the season with some momentum, off on the right foot. But yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity now for Marko Simonovic. Looking at the depth that we don't have, maybe, there's opportunities for a guy like that to really make a name for himself or to try to crack the rotation for regular season minutes because of the lack of depth. So we'll see. I would love to see a big game from Marko Simonovic. I'd love to see a big game from maybe Devon Dotson, who's on a two-way contract already, but would love to see something from him to prove to us that he deserves a full contract. A lot to watch, I think, from both halves of the game. The first half, seeing how Patrick Williams and Tony Bradley start to fit in with the rest of our starters and our bench unit and our firm rotation. I don't know how many deep Billy Donovan is going to go. We talk 10-man, 12-man rotations. But Billy Donovan, I think, will get the most out of this roster. I've been really impressed with his coaching so far in the preseason, and I really do think that he'll use his depth well, at the very least. Maybe if it's not a 13, 12-man rotation, whatever it ends up being, if it's only 11, if it's only 10, I think you're going to get a lot out of those bench pieces regardless. So very interesting to watch. Like I said, first half, starters, Patrick Williams, Tony Bradley, seeing how they fit in that rotation. Second half, seeing who wants to set themselves apart, who wants to take charge and really stand out. We'll see. A couple other tidbits here. It sounds like the Bulls are gonna have a new City Edition jersey coming this season. That's something that I saw from Daniel Greenberg, Shy Sport Updates. He tweeted out that the Bulls will have a new City Edition jersey this year. The first game they will wear it is November 27th against the Miami Heat. I didn't see a source for any of that from the Bulls directly. But, they've had City Editions, a new one every season for the past 4 or 5 seasons now. So it wouldn't surprise me. That sounds right. What else? First week of the season is next week. Bulls open the season on Wednesday against the Pistons. Home opener is Friday against the Pelicans. I will be there. It's going to be a fun game. We'll get into some of the season previews in my next video. For now, let's watch this last preseason game and get a dub and enjoy ourselves, because it could be a good time. We'll get to see some of the young stars from the Grizzlies, and hopefully we go 4-0. I'd love to go undefeated in the preseason, but at the end of the day, not something to lose sleep over, not something to worry about. If we don't get the victory, it'll be more of a learning experience than anything, top to bottom, trying to fill out the final couple slots, the final two-way, the final roster spot, and figuring out where these rotations look to start the season. So that's all for me right now. That's where we stand right now as of Thursday evening, the night before the Bulls' final preseason game. And as soon as that wraps up, we jump right into regular season coverage. So tomorrow night, as far as I'm concerned, as soon as that game ends, the regular season begins. So the fun is about to start, guys. Thank you for watching this video. Once again, make sure you are subscribed and make sure to hit the like button. Those subscriptions and likes help me out a ton. So does the super fan club. You guys, I cannot express how much I appreciate the people who have joined. I know sometimes I slack on getting that exclusive content up. I am a busy guy, but I appreciate you guys so much for joining it. It's only $4.99 a month and it supports me directly. It helps me make more great content. Hopefully soon be able to do that full time and get even more out to you guys. arturisfanclub.com/shop has the merch. And I think that's it. I think that's all of it. This was a good one. Thank you guys for watching, and we will talk very soon.